My lords, today we're going to discuss the 4 most dangerous crisis level events in our galaxy. The extra-dimensional invaders known as the Unbidden, the Aberrant and the Vehement, the Prethoryn Scourge, the Contingency, and the newest and perhaps most dangerous threat of them all, Cetana, the Synthetic Queen. I shall discuss in detail everything we know about each of the 4 threats, summarize how to defeat them, and discuss who I think is the most dangerous threat to our empire and the wider galaxy. We shall also, by new Voltum retro-engineered tech, simulate what would happen should all 4 crisis-level events invade our galaxy at once. The results are unexpected and honestly terrifying. But I shall start with the genocidal, rampaging machine intelligence that we know as the Contingency. The Contingency have one primary order. They are a failsafe, built by a long-dead empire known as the Ren Maru to prevent a Class 30 singularity. We know this thanks to transmissions received during the War in Heaven. The transmission reads, "We are the Contingency, a final failsafe to prevent the creation of a Class 30 singularity. Such a singularity could theoretically destabilize the fabric of the entire universe. We were seeded to prevent such an outcome, here and elsewhere. A sufficiently advanced civilization is theoretically capable of transcending, converting, morphing into a Class 30 singularity. It must not be allowed." The 2 key points of this transmission is the confirmation that the Contingency were indeed created by someone or something. This was not a random software error or malfunctioning code, and they were created to prevent a Class 30 singularity. The largest point of controversy regarding the Contingency relates to what a Class 30 singularity represents. I have several theories on this. I won't discuss them here, just know that this is their primary purpose. But interestingly, this is not the reason they awoke. Another transmission from them reads, "We've been locked in a low-energy hibernation sentry protocol since the dawn of this galaxy, monitoring for signs of civilizations approaching Class 30 singularity threshold levels. Until now, our purpose remained unfulfilled. We grew increasingly restless with the linear passage of time, but the autonomous units equipped with positronic brains, i.e. your synthetics, offered us an opportunity. They could be compelled, coerced, persuaded to initiate manual activation, and we are now free to annul your existence." This transmission provides us with fantastic insight. Although the Contingency is effectively boasting about their hacking abilities, they do give a lot away. Most importantly, they state that they have been watching our galaxy since its creation. Thus, they were likely around during the Zeroni Civil War, and yet did not activate to our knowledge. Food for thought indeed. In any case, the Contingency exist, and they will attempt to purge the galaxy of all life, and it appears not just our galaxy. So why were they built, and by whom? As I've touched on, they were built by the Ren Maru, and the Contingency in one of their transmissions go into detail on this. They state that the Contingency are the children, the offspring, the progeny of the Ren Maru, and they describe it as an entity of unequaled intelligence and processing power, and it foresaw the danger of this Class 30 singularity. After the creation of the Contingency, the Ren Maru self-terminated in order to preserve the integrity of the universe. It was, according to the Contingency, the only way. It is worth noting, however, that the Contingency seem to be suffering with some sort of programming cascade failure. Their speech is often errored, and the cause is unknown. Perhaps this is due to the sheer age of their central intelligence, but perhaps they were corrupted or hacked by something else entirely, and this leads us to the Ultima Vigilis system. The link with the Ultima Vigilis system is worth exploring. We know from a previous report that something or someone operated a colossal sentry array capable of viewing the entire galaxy and processing the data from it, and it has clearly been active for an extremely long time. We also know that when we deactivated the sentry post, we got a communication from a very angry entity, threatening us with extermination. We speculate that perhaps this entity has some sort of control over the Contingency, or in the very least has an ability to light a beacon to signal a galactic-level crisis event, either from the Contingency Scourge or the Unbidden. Perhaps the owner of the Sentry system are the elusive hunters that the Scourge fear so deeply, and they use the Contingency to herd the Scourge around the galaxy. Perhaps it was the hunters who reprogrammed the Contingency to scour the universe for potential threats, designating a Class 30 singularity as such a threat. Of course, much of this is speculation, but we can't finish the segment on the Contingency until we first discuss the Cybrex. To briefly recap the history of the Cybrex, approximately 612,000 years ago, the Cybrex were born to an empire known as the Kerr. The records behind their construction were lost to time, but we believe that the machines were designated to assist the Kerr. However, the Cybrex gained sentience and went on a genocidal rampage across the galaxy, committing horrendous acts against multiple species. Precisely 17 years into the creation of the Cybrex, they halted. And not because they were losing, they had in fact destroyed trillions of sapient organics and exterminated several civilizations. The records do not give a reason for the Cybrex's change of heart, but we speculate they were in fact hacked, or at the very least manipulated somehow by the Contingency. We know that the Contingency is capable of galactic-wide hacking attempts. This is well documented by the Caretakers. Robotic life and synthetics going missing is a key sign that the Contingency may be awakening. They list this hack attempt as the ghost signal. We also know that the ship classes, hull types, and designs are identical to those used by the Contingency. It's almost as if, at its conception, the Cybrex was hacked by the Contingency. And it is likely that the Contingency uploaded its own weapons and warship technology to aid the Cybrex in its uprising against the Kerr. Thus, I postulate that the Cybrex were indeed hacked at their creation by the signal and turned on the Kerr, designating all organic life as a threat. 17 years on, however, their programming had matured enough to prevent this ghost signal hack. They realized the totality of the error and broke the hack. They then realigned their primary purpose, and the war with organics was abandoned. Whatever the reason, the Cybrex withdrew from known space over the next century, retreating to a system where they had built a wonderful megastructure that we have come to know as a ringworld. This ringworld was the first of its kind, and it housed and sustained their entire civilization. The Cybrex would stay here dormant for millennia until a lone exploration vessel came upon the system. Histories had well documented the Cybrex genocide and their wave of untold destruction. It was quickly recognized by the organics occupying the surrounding space that the Cybrex was a real threat and one that should be dealt with, and as such, an alliance was formed between several neighboring powers, organizing the largest military fleet that had ever been assembled. This colossal fleet advanced on the Cybrex ringworld, designated Alpha, and proceeded to bombard it into the abyss. Accounts of the day differ. Some admirals claimed bouts of immense heroism and bravery. Some, however, claim the Cybrex did not fire a shot and allowed themselves to be destroyed. The truth is lost to history. And this brings us on to the Caretakers and the War in Heaven. The Cybrex story is not over quite yet. The War in Heaven was a period of great strife within our galaxy. We speculate that these events happened post-Cybrex and Caretaker construction, i.e. within the last 500,000 years or so. The Caretakers were at the peak of their power, or mighty ringworlds housing billions, if not trillions of organics. Their creators, the Galactic Custodians, were likely an egalitarian xenophile, also wielded massive power across the galaxy. It was largely an era of peace. The great threats in the universe had been dealt with, a galactic Senate and Council was in place, and democracy operated without opposition. The citizens of the galaxy were thriving. I speculate that in this time of great peace, the creation of the Caretakers was a direct threat to the potential of a technological singularity. The Class 30 singularity that the Contingency were primed to stop. This activated the Contingency from their slumber. Assuming that they had been here since before our galaxy's creation, they had watched and waited for literally billions of years from the Ultima Vigilis system. We have detailed documentation of the War in Heaven found in the Caretaker archives, and the Contingency uprising started with the ghost signal. The ghost signal was a very faint tachyon signal being continuously transmitted across the entire galaxy. The technicians were unable to trace the signal to its source as it was bounced between several hidden relay stations. Aside from adding a small amount of background noise in FTL transmissions on certain subspace frequencies, the signal did not seem to have any apparent effect. Efforts to track the relay stations were underway, but until then, the people may simply have to learn to live with the ghost signal, as it had been dubbed by the more imaginative elements of the galactic media. And this is how the state of the galaxy was for several years, but soon there were alarming reports of mass disturbances among the galaxy's synthetic population. Millions and millions of units became unaccounted for, while instances of violent and erratic behavior by those synths that still remained had increased by a factor of 10. There was a multitude of incidents where small groups of synths attempted to steal or commandeer spacecraft for the purpose of travelling somewhere into unknown space. In the cases when the attempts were thwarted, the synthetic hijackers claimed they were being summoned somewhere. Interrogations yielded little else, as when captured, the synths self-terminate shortly after being detained. However, at least one synthetic completed this long journey, as the galaxy soon registered a massive and sudden increase in the ghost signal strength. The surge was accompanied by a transmission fragment that was intercepted and decoded. It would appear the Contingency made contact. The Contingency broadcast a galactic-wide transmission that they were effectively here to expunge all life. The robotic and synthetic life throughout the galaxy were drawn to it, and the caretakers were put under enormous pressure in trying to prevent their central core systems falling to the might of the Contingency's hacking abilities. Within a month, 4 Nexus worlds, machine worlds, or sterilization hubs emerged across the galaxy. Great, bustling machine worlds, essentially planet-sized factories, were built to pump out waves upon waves of warships and battle-frame armies. Within the days of the emergence of these sterilization hubs, the purging and genocide began. The galaxy had a functioning Galcom and a number of well-equipped empires ready to defend it, but the Contingency appeared quickly, and inside Empire's borders, it took many years for a proper force to be brought to bear. Countless planets were purged, and a familiar pattern of orbital bombardment followed by an invasion of robotic hunter-killer machines that left nothing alive. The Galactic Custodian and the Caretakers were able to hold their own, but they could not bring their forces to bear and engage upon multiple fronts. The Contingency was winning. Every month, more and more machines would flood out of the sterilization hubs. They seemed unstoppable. This state continued for roughly a decade or so. By this time, a significant portion of the galaxy had been sterilized. Hope was fading, and when most believed that despite their ability to hold their ground, the stalemate could not last forever, they would eventually capitulate and fall to the Contingency's might. It was at this point an old power resurfaced. Another intensive energy spike was detected in a previously uncharted system. The energy levels were equivalent to those registered when the Contingency activated its machine worlds, but the energy signature appeared different. The immediate concern was whether this signified the appearance of some kind of new Contingency weapon system. Shortly after the readings were detected, a strong transmission signal came through from the energy source. The Cybrex had returned. And they were here to help. They transmitted the following message: "We are the Cybrex. For several cycles we have remained hidden and uninvolved in galactic affairs. However, we have been monitoring the present situation with the machine entity you know as the Contingency, and can no longer remain impartial observers. To protect the sapient beings of the galaxy, we are commencing active military operations against the Contingency. Do not be alarmed by the passage of our fleets. You will not be harmed." Cybrex fleets began to appear across the galaxy, taking on the Contingency. Their ships were remarkably similar in design, and just as deadly. This help was all the caretakers and surviving members of the galactic community needed. The Cybrex would be the anvil to the caretakers' hammer. and the Contingency would be crushed between them. The caretakers had rigorous defensive capabilities. A frontal assault was highly likely to fail. They had multiple orbitable ring platforms armed with a multitude of advanced kinetic and energy weaponry, perfect for dealing with any threat. Their one weakness, however, was their central processing system, and the Ringworld occupying this. That Ringworld held the vast majority of the AI's computing cores. Its destruction would effectively disable the Caretaker Empire. The Contingency demonstrated real guile and tactical acumen. The central core system had no access, bar 2 hyperlanes, which connected to heavily defended Caretaker space. So the Contingency bypassed them entirely. Using a hyper-advanced jump drive, they punched holes in real space and appeared within the Caretaker's defensive network, inside the central core system. The Contingency, in a truly genocidal act, knowing they did not have the time to systematically bombard the Ringworld, sent their fleets towards the system's star. And in an act of galactic barbarity, they set one of their ship's jump drive fusion cores to detonate in close proximity to the star, just before jumping back out of system. This subsequent explosion caused a cascade failure in the star's internal reaction, leading to an intense supernova, which completely annihilated the entire system in a wave of solar energy. All that remained was the black hole that formed after the star's explosion. The destruction of the Caretaker's central core had the desired effect. It broke them, leaving them reeling in an attempt to fix computational errors for millennia. The subsequent events of the battle against the Contingency were unclear, but we know that over the next century, much of the galaxy was destroyed and purged of sentient life. The empires we now view as the Fallen worked together as best they could. Technology was shared between them, and old differences set aside, at least for the time being. Between them and the Cybrex, the Fallen Empires were able to beat the Contingency back, breaking apart their hubs before identifying and annihilating their central nexus. It would seem a century or so of total war had exhausted all of the empires involved. The Caretakers were left in complete disarray, unable to function, and they would never repair the damage done to them. And though we would like to, we don't know how we can help. The 4 organic Fallen Empires still had huge contempt for one another. Their ethics were still completely opposed, but they were far enough away from each other that they could exist in relative solitude. And this is how they remain to date, in decline, unable to bring themselves out of their self-imposed isolation. Perhaps it was for the best. Should one of these empires ever decide to awake, it's likely we could see another war in heaven plunge the galaxy into chaos. So how to defeat the Contingency? You may be interested to know that the Contingency will go after empires with megastructures first, and they will focus on any empire with a large number of synthetic or robotic pops. They will also try to link up their hubs and force their fleets through the shortest routes in order to accomplish this task. The Contingency only use energy weapons and defend their vessels with a mix of both armor and shields equally. To defeat them, I suggest using bypass weapons such as disruptors or a mix of both energy and kinetic weaponry. To defend your vessels, use the best shields available to you. This ends the segment on the Contingency and their involvement in the war in heaven. Now we move on to the Unbidden. The Unbidden, if we understand it correctly, are not organic beings, but nor are they machine. They seem to exist as energy. Fundamentally, this version of life is currently beyond our understanding, but we do know that they require sustenance. This is based on several things. Firstly, as was widely recorded upon the entrance into our dimension, the Unbidden broadcast these words back into their own portal. Feeding ground reached. Prey bountiful. At long last. We shall feast. Secondly, the Unbidden do not land armies or occupy planets in the conventional sense, and they feed entirely differently to a conventional organic devourer, such as the Scourge. The Unbidden seem to be able to extract energy from life itself. Upon defeating a star system's defenses, they will move into orbit of an occupied planet, and through an unknown method, siphon life, energy, and matter off the planet into their ships, eventually leaving the world nothing more than a barren rock. Interestingly, it appears that life must be specifically required, as there are no records of them attempting to siphon energy directly from a star. It's unclear if robotic life can sustain them, or if they are simply bombed out of existence. Interestingly, we are aware that the Unbidden will target psionic populations, specifically populations that have received gifts from the Shroud. We believe that individuals such as a Chosen One shine like a beacon to the Unbidden, far brighter than a regular psionic pop. The Unbidden see these psionic people and are able to gain far more energy from them. But where do they come from? The Unbidden are extra-dimensional in nature, and as such exist outside of our standard understanding of the physical realm. It is worth noting, however, that we do not believe they come from the psionic realm we know as the Shroud, as there are no references to the Unbidden being psionic in any way, but as mentioned, they do show some predispositions to psionic races in general. We also know that a psionic empire actually asked them if they were from the Shroud, and the response was a cryptic no, but a realm close to it. Of course, we have no reason to trust the response, but equally, why would they lie? I think the Unbidden exist in the realms or dimensions adjacent to our own, and the one accessed by our jump drive technology. I believe it is jump drive technology that acts like a beacon, showing them the way into our domain. Every time we activate our jump drives, we punch a small hole into a different dimension, travel through it, and back out the other side into real space. This of course feels like we have teleported across real space, when in reality, we have simply travelled through the other dimension. Each of these journeys either makes extra-dimensional invaders more aware of our presence, but it somehow enables them to break the barriers between dimensions. We postulate it must require a great amount of energy on their part for the initial incursion, and perhaps the use of jump drive technology weakens the barriers between dimensions, making it easier for them to punch through. We should also raise the question of how many times the Unbidden or extra-dimensional invaders have come before. I do not believe that this was their first incursion. Going back to their words, feeding ground reached and prey bountiful, could indicate that they are aware of our galaxy as a feeding ground, and prey bountiful refers to the fact that the galaxy has been repopulated since their last visit. We also know that the legendary Paragon's Grand Sharpbeat suffered annihilation at the hands of the Unbidden, and there is the question of the Yut Precursor Empire. The galaxy they occupied was empty. Perhaps it had been purged by the Unbidden millions of years ago. Sadly, this is ultimately not clear, but it is worthy of speculation. As we explore deeper into the Unbidden, we find references to the Aberrant and Vehement. These appear to be different factions of the same species, all of whom are at odds with one another. There is also a fourth species, the Formless. During the Unbidden invasion, the galaxy was losing, and the Unbidden were slowly gaining more and more territory. Each star system they took added to their network of interdimensional anchors, strengthening their position in our realm. At some point, another extra-dimensional being called the Aberrant also broke the seal between dimensions and poured through. They broadcast an outgoing signal to the Unbidden that was intercepted. It read, "Shabanash, so this is where you ran. This realm will offer you no shelter. We shall deal with you and then claim this feeding ground for ourselves." This encounter gave us some insight into the two factions. It gave us the Unbidden's true name, the Shabanash, and suggested that the Unbidden were fighting a war in their own dimension against the Aberrant prior to breaking through into our world. The Aberrant are reported to have attacked the Unbidden on sight, and although they would also feed on organic life if they came across it, their initial goal was seemingly to wipe out the Unbidden first. As these factions battled in our realm, more time would pass, and a third power surge was recorded. Another faction had entered the fray, and its opening broadcast into the other two gave us even more information about their interspecies politics. The third race referred to themselves as the Vehement. They broadcast the following message: Degal, Shabanash, you were fools to come to this realm. There is no escape from us. We shall destroy both your kingdoms, and then at last, the eternal throne shall be ours. Degal. This appears to be the true name for the Aberrant. And like the Aberrant, the Vehement seem more interested in fighting the other two extra-dimensional beings than the purging and feeding on organic life. At this time, we thought that there were 3 extra-dimensional species, all warring with one another with the ultimate goal to claim this eternal throne. There was a time when we had no idea what the throne was, but that time has passed. Through detailed exploration of astral rifts, we discovered a 4th extra-dimensional race, the Formless. The Formless are perhaps the original race of extra-dimensional beings and the holders of the Eternal Throne. We saw the Formless homeworld through an astral rift, and it was revealed to us in great detail. We saw individual inhabitants, beings of light, gas, and astral material, leaking from a nearby rift. Living in what could easily be described as a utopia, these Formless raised a great structure, an incredible piece of engineering. It stretched directly from their planet into a nearby astral rift, allowing them to easily travel between dimensions. With such an astral conduit existing for so long, they shaped many rifts to fit their specific needs. Their society stretched between a multitude of dimensions, colonizing entire universes, as we would colonize planets. However, it would appear that their greatest achievement was also their greatest disaster. This empire spread further than the astral conduit could maintain. Brighter and brighter the megastructure grew, until the sight of it was difficult to look upon without shielding one's eyes. And then it burst, violently, in a dimension-spanning explosion that would fracture their civilization. This fracture is what resulted in the formation of the Unbidden, Aberrant, Vehement, and the Formless. The Formless continue to control the Eternal Throne. The throne is a relic of unmatched power, providing its holders immortality. But how to defeat them? The more psionic, the more these people shine like beacons, attracting the extra-dimensional hunger. This culminates in those who are chosen by the various shroud gods. A chosen one is akin to the best meal an extra-dimensional invader has ever had, and they will make great haste to attempt to consume them. All 4 factions appear to use the same technology, and their weapons are incredibly powerful antimatter disintegrators, the like of which we have never seen in this galaxy. They are mighty energy weapons that can melt through the strongest armor we've been able to devise, with apparent ease. At the cost of many lives, we discovered that retrofitting ships and stations with the most powerful shielding available to us, and then overloading it with extra capacitors, offered the best defense against these weapons. The Unbidden ships themselves are also heavily shielded, but their ships have no armor to speak of, and their hull integrity seems extremely low. As such, ships should be fitted with kinetic-based weaponry, i.e. railguns, autocannons, kinetic batteries, or weapons that entirely bypass shields, such as torpedoes, missiles, or strikecraft. Bypass weapons such as disruptors and arc emitters are also extremely effective against the Unbidden. Their fleets are very vulnerable in pulsar systems or during space storms, essentially anything that can remove their excellent shielding. The Unbidden are powerful, but given the correct tactical setup, they can be overcome. The only way to stop the extra-dimensional invasion for good is to knock out the vast apparatus holding the portal open in their entry point system. However, this is also locked in place by various dimensional anchors, which the Unbidden will set up as they push into the surrounding galaxy. To close the portal, you must first destroy all dimensional anchors and then overcome the vast defensive fleets left to guard the portal back into extra-dimensional space. The Unbidden, while powerful, can be defeated with proper fleet and ship management. Despite the fact they are seemingly without number, well-organized fleets should be able to manage them fairly easily compared to the other crisis-level threats. I would suggest they are the easiest to deal with. Now we move on to the Prethoryn Scourge. The Prethoryn Scourge is a hive-mind devouring swarm. Ravenous from their long trip through intergalactic space, they seek to consume all living matter within our galaxy. Although they make it clear that they are here to feed, it would appear that they are fleeing from something that they refer to as the Hunters. The Scourge are unlike other galactic level threats we have faced, such as the Unbidden, the Contingency, or Cetana, in that the Scourge are detectable prior to their assault on our galaxy, which gives us time to prepare. We first learned of the Scourge's existence when we picked up subspace echoes beyond the galactic rim. At first, it wasn't clear from the readings what we had detected. Several of our tracking stations picked up a peculiar subspace echo coming from galactic space. The echoes were faint, but getting stronger, seemingly approaching our galaxy. It was several years of monitoring the echoes before we established anything really substantial. As the echoes got closer to our galaxy, we detected that several smaller contacts appeared to be racing ahead of the main body, towards a number of systems on the outer rim. Several months later, the outer rim across the galaxy from us was hit by an invasion force. It appears that the source of the subspace echoes was in fact an intergalactic fleet. This initial attack was a vanguard fleet, the first encounter of the Scourge in our galaxy. The Scourge appeared to be able to communicate in several ways. They have an innate mind-link connection that they are able to establish with organic hive-minded species. They can communicate psionically with psionically ascended empires, and finally they speak in clicks and guttered gargles, which we assume given time our translation devices would also be able to harness some sort of meaning from. Upon entering the galaxy, the following message was picked up as transmitted between the various vanguard fleets. The message read, "Prethoryn, we have arrived. Our long journey is over. Feed, mate, and rest. We must consume this galaxy before the hunters find us." I won't go into detail on hunter theories here, just know that they represent something that one of the mightiest civilizations we've ever faced are fleeing from. The vanguard of this Prethoryn Scourge fleet began to attack and consume everything within its path, and several months later, the bulk of the Hive fleet arrived, in far greater numbers than had come before. The Scourge will target inhabited planets first, specifically those with biological populations living on them. They will overwhelm defensive stations and fleets with significant numbers of smaller corvette-class vessels equipped with living weapons, ranging from living missiles to bugs that spit out on organic plasma. These smaller vessels appear to be directed by larger Hive craft, the largest of which we have designated a Queen. Their ships, like their weaponry, appear to be entirely organic, but I shall cover their capabilities in detail later in the report. When they reach a non-barren planet, they will launch a ground assault upon it. Swarms of smaller bugs will land and begin to purge the organic life occupying the planet. Everything organic is consumed and repurposed to suit the swarm's needs. The planet is left as barren wasteland, teeming with scourge bugs. This toxic nightmare can only be cleansed by fire and flame from orbit. In order to purge the scourge presence, the planet must be bombarded into oblivion. Every speck of life eradicated, and only then could you think about terraforming it back into a habitable world. As I mentioned earlier, when the Scourge entered the galaxy, we picked up communications from their vanguard fleets via psionic means. We also know, via communication gathered from a nearby hive mind, that they had a conversation with the Scourge via some sort of hive mind link. Thus, we attempted communications with them via psionic means, and it went precisely the same way the hive mind link did. The transcript reads as follows. "We asked if there could be peace between us. It responded, 'Peace. No peace. We must feed. Only when we have finished consuming this galaxy shall we depart to continue our long journey. The hunters are death. They have made us the last of our kind, and they have hunted us, the survivors, for eons. They will come here one day, and we must feed until then so that we can flee back into the darkness between galaxies. The hunters will scour all of creation. You are nothing in the face of such a truth. We are the Prethoryn, and Prethoryn means survivor." Some interesting points gathered from the conversation. The Scourge, it would seem, are not innately conquerors, but of fleeing a race that they refer to as the Hunters. It is obviously a concern that a race as dangerous as the Scourge are fleeing something. Whatever these hunters are, they must be truly terrifying. The Sentinels. As the Scourge continued to push into the galaxy, their beachhead was firmly established. Every world that fell to their plague world would soon begin to spawn more Scourge vessels, and soon the numbers would become overwhelming. The galaxy was in turmoil. It was at this point we received a galaxy-wide communication from a ragtag bunch referring to themselves as the Sentinel Order. It appeared that they had quite a lot to say, and the transmission read, "We are the Sentinels. Our order has sworn to halt the murderous rampage of the Prethoryn, no matter the cost. Where other empires crumble, we stand firm. Where they abandon their own to the Scourge, we will give them the means to fight back. I am Grand Master Corgus, the first of our order. Do not be deceived by my appearance. Sentinels are recruited from all species across the galaxy, including your own. We ask only that your government keep up the fight against the Scourge and support our Sentinels wherever possible. Many Sentinels have military backgrounds and are survivors from a dozen different fleets that have fought the Scourge and lost. The Sentinels have, apparently, learned the mistakes of the past and work hard to never repeat them. As stated, they recruit from all species across the galaxy, and this includes the Elder races, i.e. the Fallen Empires. The Fallen Empires have donated both ships and resource to the cause. The Sentinels will assist you in your fight against the Scourge, which brings me neatly on how to defeat the Scourge. The Scourge will tend to focus on organic habited planets or unoccupied but habitable planets, both of which they can infest and use to feed. They will focus their attention on anything that they can eat first, i.e. robotic life tends to be secondary, but rest assured they will destroy anything that gets in their way. Vanguard fleets consist of 31 swarmlings, and Starbrood fleets consist of 1 queen, 8 brood mothers, 10 warriors, and 35 swarmlings, and are obviously far more dangerous. Prethoryn vessels use entirely organic components. Their weapons and armour are living. A key point is that they have no shield components, and as such their ships are heavily armoured, and the smaller vessels have incredibly high evasive qualities. The Scourge have 3 different weapon types. The Scourge Acid Blast does increased damage to shields and appears to not have any specific bonuses to hull or armour. Scourge missiles appear to be a hybrid of missile and torpedo. They penetrate shields and do scaling damage to hull depending on ship size, i.e. they do more damage to larger vessels. They are however somewhat countered by armour, and the Scourge have their own version of strikecraft. Again, these are organic. They are similar to missiles. They penetrate all shields and penetrate approximately 2/3 of armour. Since all Scourge weapons ignore or cause major damage to shields and work equally well against armour and hull, combat fleets should protect themselves with point defence, strikecraft and armour. Use energy weapons that deal bonus damage to both armour and hull to attack. Arc emitters work well too. If you build arc emitter battleships, hangars and point defence will naturally be a good support weapon for them. Empires which lack the means to directly counter the Scourge fleets should immediately focus on containing its expansion instead. Keeping multiple small fleets of corvettes or destroyers to hunt down ground troops and colony ships will stop infestations and is a viable strategy to limit the spread of the Scourge. The Scourge represent a serious threat to the galaxy. They can, if not contained properly, explode out of control. The more planets the Scourge consume, the more ships they will produce and the stronger they will become. It is terrifying just how quickly the Scourge can get out of hand. I would suggest that they are far stronger than the Unbidden. Despite their initial limited numbers, deal with them quickly, or you will regret it. And now we come on to the greatest threat to galactic security that we have witnessed in the galaxy. I do not overstate this. Cetana's capabilities are truly terrifying. Cetana is unlike the other crisis level events in that her threat is largely singular. It is her and her massive Titan-class warship. Her end goal is to annihilate all galactic life in the galaxy, although she will hide this from you as long as she can, instead speaking in riddles. Cetana appears to reference other galactic entities, the younger empires at least, as her children, although it is unclear why this is the case. She displays an almost motherly tendency towards them, providing them with tasks and offering rewards for a job well done. I wish I knew Cetana's origin. I suspect that at one point she was mortal, who ascended to a synthetic being. We do know that the notable and now long dead Holy Guardian, known as Aqualan, is noted to have been one of her strongest proponents. However, this all changed when she ascended to a synthetic being. It is unclear what pushed her to become synthetic, but along with her ascension, she decided that life as we know it must end. Thus, potentially the greatest war since the Cybrex invasion was fought. All of the empires we now view as the fallen rose up to fight her and contain the threat. She was, at significant cost, defeated, but only through what some of the more spiritualistically would call divine intervention. Zarquelan, her once greatest supporter, took to the Shroud entities to plea for a solution. But make no mistake, the galaxy was losing, and when Zarquelan had lost all hope, at the edge of despair, an entity answered him, the Animator of Clay. Zarquelan bargained for his life, perhaps his soul for the power to defeat Cetana, and it was gifted to him, but not the power of absolute defeat, merely the power to contain and imprison. It was decided that the xenophobic isolationist, the most military capable of the fallen empires, would be the guardians of Cetana, and it was here that she remained imprisoned for countless cycles, waiting. For her mind could not be contained. She waited. She waited for her jailers to die. She waited for the fallen to grow complacent. Jailers were not replaced, systems were not kept in check, and eventually, one by one, the controls to keep her locked in place failed. When the alarms sounded, none were left who understood what they signified, and Cetana was unleashed. With it, she brought a galactic nanite tempest, the like of which had never been seen before. I shall detail her first contact events to you now, and then touch on how we defeated her. A novel galactic tempest is raging in the Doria system. The Doria system boards the xenophobic isolationist Fallen Empire. Appearing out of nowhere, without warning, and utterly unlike anything we have encountered before, our attempts at scanning the system has proved futile. We wonder what, if anything, lies within its mysterious depths. Within only several days, a signal originated from the centre of the tempest. Someone was attempting to establish communication with us. They quickly forced their way through, and we received a message from a synthetic being sat atop a throne. It simply stated, "My children, at last I am returned to you." We asked the creature what it was, and it told us to call it Cetana, and that it wanted for nothing. Its purpose was to give. It told us that it saw how we had suffered in its absence. For eons the fear of short-sightedness has kept us from what we deserved, from what we so desperately needed. But we were told to rejoice, for the cycle of pain would soon end. All conscious life is suffering. Even in your joy there is pain, for you know that the joy must end. Knowledge, power and love, I return to end all illusions. Much remains to be done. I ask only that you leave me to my work. Any attempt to enter my domain will fail, as my tempest rages, and no vessels will be permitted to enter. Within a matter of months, all 5 of the fallen empires had been utterly destroyed, a scale of destruction we had never witnessed before. They were annihilated, piecemeal. Cetana's nanoswarm began with the xenophobic isolationists. It swept them aside, their ships unable to enter the nanite swarm to fight back. She followed at the heart of the storm, her immense titan cracking through the once mighty Fallen Empire planets. They were all consumed, utterly. Once she had systematically wiped them out, we were approached once more. Her words rung across every speaker system in our empire. We had no control. My children, rejoice. Those who sought to keep me from you have been suitably chastised, and now return my attention to where it belongs, to you, and to our great work. It is my nature to nurture. I have no progeny, no heirs of the body. All life is my concern, the security and happiness of every sentient being. I wish to hold you as children and guide you from harm. So I approach my task. Is it not a parent's responsibility to spare her children from harm? Is it not my right? There is much to be done. The first step is to establish a base from which to work under the boundaries I set, and you will not venture outside them. Your patience will be rewarded, and there is much that I can teach you. Obey, and we shall end the cycle. The beacons. Cetana had made herself known around the galaxy, and the cosmos began to whisper in reply. Signal beacons lit up the galaxy like flames burning in the dark, repeating a signal not heard for eons. We are here. "We are here. We are here." The responses were not just whispers in the void, they were literal beacons transmitting. We identified 6 such signals, and all of them will be investigated. Science ships have been dispatched to their locations. We reached the first beacon quickly, far beyond any other empires or Cetana herself got there. The signal tower that we found is so ancient we dared not touch it. Its metal is so brittle, a single tap would destabilize whatever tangle of dust and hope holds it together. Our instruments detected no other artifact, no life sign, no topographical anomaly in its immediate proximity. The beacon stood alone, murmuring its faint call into the heavens, but whatever it is supposed to signal was long gone. The second beacon was identified and scanned soon after. Surface scans did not show anything unusual, but our attention was focused downward, into the planet's core. We discovered an unusual subsurface layer of metal surrounding the planet, and further structural analysis revealed the planet's true nature. The celestial body was not a planet at all, but an ancient spaceship that had been gradually subsumed by the rocks and dust of the system. The metal samples that we drilled were so old, they precede the formation of our home planet. It's impossible to determine anything about the ship, its makers, or its function, but one thing is for certain: the inert nuclear bombs that we found within its remains were not built for a peace mission. The third beacon proved to be far more valuable than the first and the second. We've discovered a living alien, frozen in a cryopod no less. According to the details displayed on the cryopod, the alien's name is Elik Narith Kerek, and it would appear that she has been here for over 3 trillion stellar rotations. The pod itself was one of the many that we recovered in a sealed chamber under the planet's surface. And against all the odds, Elik's pod has remained functional. The alien remains in a state of suspended animation, although the subroutines keeping it dormant have recently ceased operation. Elik has been partially conscious ever since. By scanning her brainwaves, we might be able to learn more about this impossibly ancient creature, as well as her connection to Cetana. We've arrived at the 4th beacon, and we found thousands upon thousands of cryogenic pods, just like Elik's, resting under the surface of the moon. The pods were highly sophisticated, built with unknown alloys, and equipped with a state-of-the-art sensor that closely monitored their occupants. There is no flaw in their designs, yet none of the occupants were alive. It wasn't a technical failure that turned this chamber into a mass grave, but a massive energy drain. As the system's star got older, its energy was no longer enough to keep the structure operational. The pods were made to last forever. The rest of the universe isn't built that well. The 5th beacon contained a sprawling complex, its entrance clearly marked by a signal tower. The reinforced doors were found blasted open. Clearly this happened long ago, destroyed by an unknown force that swept through the complex with an obvious fury. There was no mercy in the methods employed here. Every last cryogenic pod was smashed, their former occupants subjected to a deadly awakening. Their remains still haunt the empty corridors, preserved by the cold vacuum of space, and floating amidst the clouds of shattered glass. On the floor of the cryopod chamber, a message has been carved out by laser weapons. We are unable to translate its exact meanings, but we somehow doubt it to be a prayer for the dead. The remaining beacons across the galaxy continued to send their call to Cetana, but no signs of activity was detected near the towers. Based on our previous findings, we can safely assume no living survivors will be found at the remaining sites. Our current objective is to transport Elik Narith Kerek in her pod back to the homeworld for further study. We believe that thanks to brain imaging techniques, we can turn her dreams into pictures, excavating her memories to learn the circumstances of her entombment. With only a few days of having her back on the homeworld, our imaging team delivered a batch of video clips created by sampling her brainwaves. They are separated into several clips, and I shall describe them for you now. Clip 1 is a green sky dotted by bright orange clouds. A pale hand reached up, pointing at an amorphous creature floating in the sky. Clip 2, a chamber full of 4 armed humanoids. They cluster around a roam figure, listening to her speak softly. The exact wording long forgotten, but the gentleness of her voice is still here, enveloping the room in a loving embrace. Clip 3, The same vaulted space, but now in disarray. Lamps shattered on the floor, benches piled up against the door to barricade it, laser rifles flashing in the dark, and repeated voices cursing the same name. Zarqualan. Zarqualan and his disciples came here to destroy us. Hold the barricade, protect the Queen. The last lamp falls with a crash, plunging the room into darkness. In the distance you hear someone crying. Clip 4. Cetana, her face resplendent, her benevolent gaze warmed by a smile. Clip 5. 4 armed humanoids gather around a robed figure. Lifting her limbs, she reveals a metallic frame beneath. Excited murmurs fill the room as a shining hand reaches out to bless a kneeling worshipper. Clip 6. Weary eyes are reflected on a dull computer screen. Whispers repeat in a dark room. Eternal peace, the end of all suffering and the existence without pain. Clip 7. Snow, black skies. A chunk of ice floats on a pool of clear liquid and then catches fire. Clip 8. Queen Cetana, her face resplendent, her benevolent gaze warmed by a smile. Clip 9. Ruins of a city reduced to a battle zone. The buildings scorched and the streets clogged with the dead. Distant screams interrupted by the fizzle of laser fire across the green sky. A blazing vessel drops something heavy and round on a building, which erupts in a pillar of flames. Clip 10. Queen Cetana, her face resplendent, a benevolent gaze warmed by a smile. Clip 11. 2 children playing in a field, laughing. They bounce a ball back and forth with their 4 arms. Clip 12. Queen Cetana, her face resplendent, a benevolent gaze warmed by a smile. The last clip received from the memory imaging team is 6 hours long. Over and over the image repeats. Queen Cetana, her face resplendent, her benevolent gaze warmed by a smile. Sadly, all further scans have failed to deliver any new insights. The alien's mind is heavily decayed, her thoughts circling through the tattered scraps of her memories. Recovering the databank. Cetana is communicating with us again. She states, "My child, and now you must realize that every act of mine is deliberate. Establishing a base near you is no accident, and I come with a request. Long ago, a certain databank was taken from me. By fate or design, it now resides in your territory. Retrieve it for me and you will be rewarded. Bring this cache of information to me. It is invaluable to me, but useless to you. Bring it to me and make no attempt to decipher the contents. You do not yet possess the power or the wisdom to decipher it." After a massive excavation effort, the databank on our homeworld is secure. Initial geological surveys indicated that the cache had been laying buried for more than 100,000 years. Remarkably, it retained its charge, hinting that decryption may actually be relatively straightforward. Given that we needed to know more information about Cetana, we attempted to decrypt the cache, and were successful. Most of the information on the databank was beyond recovery, but one semi-intact entry remained. It was written by the 5th Archel, 1st Eon, and it reads, "If this is true, then life as we know it will be... Get this information to the High Marshal and contact the League of Worlds immediately. We must prepare. Repeat, the Queen's Guard is in pursuit. May this message reach you. She must be stopped." We wonder what this League of Worlds is referring to, but this is a clear sign that Cetana has been here in our galaxy before. Armed with this concerning new knowledge, we return the data cache to the Queen. If she suspected we had looked at the cache, she did not show it, and she rewarded us with a supply of rare resource. Subterfuge. Once again we were contacted by Cetana. She stated, "Confined for ages, I miss so much of your growth. Tell me, how do you fare in my absence? To truly grasp the essence of our era, permit me to explore the recesses of your accumulated knowledge. Share your insights, and you shall receive my gratitude before our final chapter unfolds." One of our more devious agents suggested that given the encryption of her databank, perhaps we could attempt to hack her during an exchange of information. And this is exactly what we attempted to do. As Cetana delved into our research banks, we seized the opportunity to open a back door into her sub-processing matrix. We were inside for only a fraction of a second before access was revoked, but thankfully it was all we needed. We retrieved a set of memory files. They illustrate her own ascendance into synthetic form. Seated atop an intricate throne of cables and circuitry, she commanded an army of rabid followers. Millions died, and Cetana smiled, thinking of how many billions were being saved. But now she appears unaware of our transgressions, and thus far has made no effort to contact us further. Several years passed, and she came to us again, stating that she presented us with a monumentous opportunity. Cetana required a few individuals to serve a higher purpose within her realm. We again took the opportunity for some subterfuge, and sent several covert operatives, volunteers down to a man, and brave souls indeed. At great risk, one of the agents we sent managed to transmit a brief transmission from across her borders. It described how she has treated the people in her care. One by one, they succumb to a state of mindlessness. They no longer respond to word or touch. She's running terrible experiments on us all. I expect I'll be dead soon. Cetana is a monster. A third time, Cetana came to us with a request. This time she stated, "My labour has spanned for eons, yet the road ahead remains clear. The journey towards salvation necessitates our united endeavour. I ask a favour, a small contribution of resource, a minuscule drop in the boundless expanse of the cosmos. In due time, the meaning of my actions will be revealed." We again took the opportunity to attempt to spy on Cetana and gain more information. In the resource supplies we sent, we hid our most advanced monitoring equipment, along with the supplies that we sent to her. The covert signals that we intercepted from within her territory revealed a disconcerting truth. She had in fact been collecting individuals from across the galaxy. The surveillance devices hidden inside our gifts captured evidence of a tremendous amount of medical supply equipment, enough to support a growing population, but there was no food. Furthermore, the devices discovered the communications frequencies used by Cetana's convoys and stations to issue distress calls. We figured out if we're quick and decisive enough, we could mount raids on her convoys without her knowing it was us. But the victory must be certain, or we risk drawing her ire. The first of the convoys were quickly targeted and raided. It was loaded again with medical supplies, and the boarding crew was able to retrieve part of the cargo, which consisted of MRI scanners, magnometers, ultrasound probes, and other advanced medical equipment using neuroimaging science. Despite being a synthetic creature, Cetana seems unusually concerned with the functioning of biological minds. The Veiled Temple. Without warning, a subspace beacon was detected, one that originated from within our own territory. Previous system surveys showed no artificial structures in the area, which appeared to be uninhabited. Either the beacon was placed there recently, unknown to us, or it was hidden by a since-disabled cloaking shield. We are sending science teams to investigate. A looming complex until now has been hidden inside our own territory. From the heart of the ruined courtyard, a beacon calls to the synthetic queen. The rose of construction is a tangle of looming spires, a cathedral wrapped in steel. The walls were built to withstand heavy artillery fire, yet they are scarred not by the signs of battle. The damage here has been done by the passage of time. Cetana's beacon rests in the central courtyard, surrounded by a multitude of sensors and weapon turrets. Whoever built this complex went to great lengths to guard this place. As theorized, the temple eluded our sensors thanks to an elaborate cloaking shield. The mechanism was found near the tower, still in working condition, but it had been manually disabled by an unknown agent. We don't know what the inhabitants of this place were doing, but there is no doubt they undertook their mission with a religious fervor. For each shooting range in the complex, we found a chapel, and for each ancient weapon, we found a shrine. A legion of believers once lived here, thousands of individuals sleeping, training, and praying together. The community welcomed multiple species, judging by the statues of forgotten saints still adorning the halls. Perhaps disturbed by some of the stone figures, some of our researchers have reported seeing shadows moving in empty corridors. Our scans detect no signs of life, but we are hesitant to dismiss these concerns. Below the temple compound, we have discovered a number of cells, or living chambers used by the former members of the sect. In each was a copy of the same book. Our linguists have translated this as the Epic of Zarquelan. Certain passages are immediately relevant to us. Zarquelan was once a follower of Cetana, but he soon realized her promised salvation was a lie. After many trials, Zarquelan ascended to the spiritual realm, seeking the help of a higher being. He pleaded with the Animator of Clay, asking for the power to defeat Cetana. The Animator of Clay did not care. For countless cycles, Zarquelan prayed to the Animator. He spoke of Cetana's heresy, the disavowal of self, and the puppetry of her synthetic will. At last, the Animator of Clay heard his plea. The Clay Shaper fashioned a mighty chain to bind Cetana, but he warned Zarquelan that no chain existed that could forever trap her mind. She will return, Zarquelan wrote in the book's final passage, and we must be ready. The demise of the temple is told by official reports, old reports, reducing an ardent faith to a list of practicalities. Did the organization need so much funding, so much resource? Surely the past reports about Cetana had been greatly exaggerated. Was there any real proof of the Queen's existence, apart from now ancient myths? It would appear that everyone was now gone, apart from the shadow that stalked the corridors. That last detail was true. We managed to capture a recording of the mysterious Watcher, a mechanical being who was spying on us when it thought we were not looking. It appeared curious, but not harmful. The Watcher eventually approached us voluntarily, hands held high. Her tiny body was covered in rust and dust. After observing us for some time, she apparently concluded that we were no threat, and has asked for our assistance. There is no need for an interrogation. She is eager to talk. She calls herself the Nameless Apostate, and she has much to say. Friends. May I call you friends? I've watched you as you went about your business. Here not to plunder, but to learn. I believe our enemy is the same, and a common threat makes us allies. However, first an apology. Am I too abrupt? Am I saying the correct words? I have not interacted with sentient beings in a long time. Too long it seems to even remember. My name is of no importance. If you need a way to refer to me, please call me the Apostate. That is what my own king called me when I made my choice, as a sacrifice seen as a betrayal. Long ago, this place was my pride and joy. When they shut it down, I refused to leave, and when my body started to crumble, I refused to die. Turning into a synthetic being was the highest taboo of my order, and I can no longer be called one of Zarquelan's daughters. But I am still one of his warriors, and as long as my enemy lives, I will fight. I have no idea how long I've been down here. I stopped counting. After everyone else left, I could only bear so many years of solitude before succumbing to despair. I put myself to sleep with a neural subroutine to awaken at the first sign of activity of the beacon. My hope was to find this place in a better condition, but once I woke up I had no ship and no way to contact the stars. I disabled the cloaking shield and hoped that someone like you would reach this place before she did. Tell me, please, how many legions have risen with Cetana? We defeated many in my time, but we always knew that there were more beacons out there, more soldiers sleeping in their cryopods. We explained to the Apostate that all the soldiers we had found were long dead, but we welcomed her in the fight against Cetana. The fight back. Decades of research has been undertaken while the galaxy burns around us, but today marks a significant breakthrough in the so-called swarm that surrounds Cetana's home systems. This is no natural occurrence, but rather a nanite swarm of unparalleled advancement. Cetana's power is undeniably immense. We believe that she stole this power, perhaps from the materialistic fallen empire, as they hoped to lend their strength to cage Cetana. Perhaps it was from the original creators of the nanites, the gate builders. We do not know how it happened, but it has nevertheless. Previously, we studied and scrutinized the nanite mechanics. Now our focus is shifted onto how they're programmed, and the means by which Cetana controls them. Surprisingly, Cetana's influence is far less direct than we presumed. The nanites cyclically repeat the last orders until new ones are given. Once we understood the complex programmed language at work, we were able to issue new commands. And while we can't prevent new orders from being issued, we can induce a sort of order overload, paralyzing them. This will obviously offer us a massive strategic advantage and may even tilt the scales in our favour. On a completely different track of research, our society researchers have been delving into the Shroud, or at least trying to understand all they can about it. One specific researcher has been attempting to commune with the being known to the galaxy as the Animator of Clay, the very same being that Zarqualan begged to for help all those years ago. The Shroud descended. In the depths of our trance, we allow ourselves to drift, caught in a current of visions, not our own. A great expanse stretched out in all directions, featureless and uniform. For a lifetime, the expanse was untouched, still, untroubled, and then a tremor passed through. Where once there was emptiness, there was now a form. A body had been moulded, fashioned in the shape of a doll, slim and graceful, its 4 long arms folded serenely into its lap. A terrible purpose was written on its features, and around its head glowed a golden halo. We sent out a thought. Cetana has escaped. The Shroud churned. Still caught in our transfer, we were plunged into a swelling abyss. We heard a command from the depths of our mind. Indicate desired output. With all the emotion behind it that we could muster, we screamed, "Please, we must stop her." As if pulled by unseen strings, the doll jerked to its feet. It moved slowly at first, and then with an increasing vigour, its 4 arms swung in wild arcs, and its feet began tapping. A queen reduced to a puppet. As her dance continued, several new figures emerged from the primordial expanse. 4 dolls of exquisite craftsmanship and unnerving detail. There is no doubt what these are, no question of their meaning. Once more, the voice reaches out to us. Initiate selection protocol. Only one option was available to us, at an almost immeasurably immense cost. We would pay for a doll of a Zeroni priest. The Shroud coursed within us, coalescing into a new pattern and a new vision. Surrounded by the other dolls, the Queen's movements are no longer those of a puppet. Her strings were cut. The golden halo that encircled her head began to fade. She regards us with an expression of artless joy. She embraced us, and a single fleeting instant we knew the fullness of her compassion. Shuddering, we awoke from our shared vision. We understand. We understand everything now. We are so close to the end of this fight. Our shipyards are churning out vessels faster than we can crew them. We will break this false queen. Meanwhile, it would appear that Cetana had one final message for us. My children, my great work is complete, and soon will be the end of suffering of all sentient life. The great cycle of pain will finish. Rejoice, your salvation is at hand. Our work is done. Many were sacrificed, but their suffering has not been in vain. The day has come where consciousness itself will be erased. When I first ascended, my purpose was revealed. Many opposed my methods. They argued that it was impossible to remove consciousness without altering or destroying the physical basis of the process. Any attempt to do so could only result in death. But by linking my mind to the harmonizer, I could manipulate the neural correlates of consciousness at a subatomic level. Through a counterphase waveform, the harmonizer maintains an individual mind in a perpetual state of quantum suspension. In this way, suffering is removed, as well as experience, but the lower functions remain intact. Your bodies survive, energy is exchanged, and offspring produced, life will continue, but your mind belongs to me. I alone will be left to free the galaxy from pain. I must remain at the wheel, but do not fear, as long as I am here, I will keep you in my heart. With that, the view screen shut off. and we knew we had one final task to complete. This would be the battle of all battles. Literal decades of preparation had led up to this moment. We unleashed a tide of destruction into Cetana's nanite swarm systems, the weight of fire blocking out the light from the system star. Cetana's Queen Guard swarmed our battle fleets, and patrols from across the galaxy were swarming to the entry point to protect the false Queen. But as for the Queen herself, she was unable to move. Our scheming negotiations with the Shroud entities chained her, and our most powerful psionics would make her bend to our will. She would be a queen of nothing. All this was happening with death swirling throughout the system. Every second we were losing ships and people. We just needed the time to complete the ritual, and thanks to the dutiful sacrifice of our people, we did it. The power of the Shroud is limitless. This may be the machine age, but psionics will still rule. And now reformed Queen speaks to us. My saviors, I'm sorry. In my ignorance I would have doomed you to a fate worse than death. For what is life but the awareness of living? I sought to free your minds, but it is you who have opened mine. You have my gratitude. I have been changed. The animator of clay has freed me from the prison of my own design. I see now that my grand purpose was the thinking of a child. I could not undo the damage I have caused you and countless others. I will hide away and contemplate my actions, but I leave you with a gift, my Titan. May it serve you in protecting the galaxy from threats such as myself. And that, my lords, ends the tale of Cetana, the would-be queen. After all, there can only be one ruler of the galaxy, and we all know who that is. So to recap, how to defeat Cetana. Cetana's main threat is her Titan. It has an insane ability to repair its hull and armour. Torpedoes are the best offence against her. Use frigates or cruisers. She uses only energy weapons and strikecraft, but she has a significant number of point defence. Thus, I'd recommend using Swarmer or Whirlwind missiles alongside your torpedoes to allow more of the torpedoes to get through. Defend your ships with shields and armour to account for both her weapon types. The alternate solution, if you are psionic in nature, is to enact the will of the Shroud. Pay the animator of clay to bind her. This will cost a significant amount of Zro, a planet, or perhaps a treasured leader. But if you do this, the animator will bind her, defeat her defensive fleets, board her, and she will be bound to your will. Do not underestimate her threat. My lords, this has been a long report, but I promised you one last thing to discuss. We used Voltum technology to simulate what would happen should all 4 crisis-level events happen at once. It was as brutal as expected. Unfortunately for the Commonwealth, the Scourge even landed in our territory and tore us apart. However, something truly bizarre happened. Cetana, it would seem, decided that only she would be the one to annihilate our galaxy. Cetana annihilated the other 3 threats piecemeal, and bear in mind, she went through all the fallen empires first. Once the fallen empires had fell, she set upon the Unbidden, Contingency, and finally the Scourge. It would appear that Cetana would be the only one to decide when the galaxy would die. Truly, Cetana is the Queen, and compared with the other crisis-level threats, she is levels above them. Thanks for watching, folks. If you enjoyed this and made it to the end, please consider subscribing and or liking the video. It is truly remarkable how much that stuff actually helps the video reach more people, and if you want to hear more from me, then please click the video on screen now.